For you tonight, psychic explorer, psychic lawyer Mark Anthony is back in the house with us. Coming up next. Welcome back, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-host is Victoria Monday, and down in the chat room, Quarantine Ghost haunting the chat. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Psychic lawyer and psychic explorer Mark Anthony is back with us. We've had him on a number of times before talking about a myriad of different topics. Last time it was about the supernatural in COVID, but this time is to talk about triangle activity around the world, more specifically the Bermuda Triangle, which is right in his own backyard. Mark, fantastic to have you back with us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Victoria. It's always great being back on Edge of the Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, absolutely. We love having you. And yes, everybody, I am drinking eggnog tonight.
Hey, why not? You know, this Thanksgiving, talk about scary, this is 2020 has been a very unusual year. It's been a very painful year for a lot of people. And I don't know how nostalgic I'm going to be for it once it passes. So, but for everybody facing Thanksgiving without a loved one there and facing the holidays, our country's been through pandemics. We've been through depression. We've been through world wars. We can do this. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun, but we can do this. So.
Absolutely. We've been through a lot before as a country, as a world. We can certainly battle through this one and get through it. And eventually, this too shall pass and we'll move on. And you're right. I will not be nostalgic about 2020, but I think it's one of those that we can look back on and be like, we got through that, and whatever the next great ordeal is, we can say, hey, we got through that 2020 stuff. We can get through whatever the next thing is.
Yeah. Someday we'll be telling our grandkids, back in 2020.
Right. Uphill both ways,
Well, I read today 2020 is not the year you're supposed to acquire things. It's supposed to be the year where you know what you can live with and what you can live without. So personally, I've learned a lot this year, if I can ever remember what day of the week it is or month.
Well, Victoria, I think that's a very important point because I think, in gain there's loss, as loss there is gain, and there's a balance to the universe. And what we've seen with 2020 is, in many ways, it has shown us what's important: our family, the people we love. And back in March during the lockdown, I live in a barrier island on East Coast Central Florida. So when Mike said the Bermuda Triangle's in my backyard, he's not kidding. It's essentially
cool.
Right up the street. And so I live about maybe like 800-900 feet from the ocean. And but in this little community, I started seeing parents with their kids, couples taking walks, older folks walking, holding hands. And it seemed like everything paused and people got off the insanity of the merry-go-round that is our world and took some time to stop and smell the roses. And certainly everyone being out of work and the loss of income and the difficulties everybody faced. But you're absolutely correct, Victoria. This was the year that demonstrated to all of us what is really important. And so anyway, I don't want to get off on a whole COVID rap because Lord knows we're all living with it. So
all my friends started not victory gardens, but like COVID gardens, and we all learned to make bread again. There's so much bread this year. Everything. I have a really good recipe if you need it. 3 ingredients.
We should post it online.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, post it on the new Edge of the Rabbit Hole website, which I was supposed to make that announcement at the beginning of the show, too. Yes, everybody, there is a new Edge of the Rabbit Hole website. You can go to edgeoftherabbithole.com. And there's not a ton there, but there's information about the show, links to the archive playlist, and the upcoming schedule of guests, which everybody always asks for, hey, who are the guests that are coming up? And now you can actually see the list there. So go check it out, edgeoftherabbithole.com.
So Mike, before you start asking me questions, let me ask you a question. Your new book, A Walk in the Shadows, from what I've seen, it's doing really well. And I know that you were supposed to go on tour this year to promote it, but instead you shifted your focus to going on tour online. And I think it's really great because, I'm seeing it all over social media, and I've seen the reviews on it are really good. So kudos. So
Thank you.
I'm going to do a pitch for it. If you want to learn about all things mysterious from a ghostorian and a logical point of view, then definitely A Walk in the Shadows is the book for you.
Thank you, Mark. I absolutely appreciate that. And, this man here is a writer as well. I know we were going to talk about the Bermuda Triangle here, but Mark also has a couple of wonderful books, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. So make sure you also grab those books, because Mark's journey is definitely a intriguing one, and we're very lucky to have him on the show tonight. So definitely pick those up as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't have a book. I'm working on a graphic novel, though.
That's right, your graphic novel.
Ooh, a graphic novel. Is there sex and violence?
No.
There's magic, though.
Okay, magic works.
It's called Doppler Girl.
Only because we're after 9 o'clock. Did I say sex and violence? But I like G-rated movies as long as there's plenty of sex and violence. But anyway.
All right. So on that note, let's get into the Bermuda Triangle. So yeah, this is a subject, Mark, that certainly fascinated me. Of course, everybody's very familiar with the Bermuda Triangle. I was on a show, aired earlier this year, called the Alaska Triangle, which is very similar type of phenomenon that happens in Alaska. And there's other of these types of areas around the world, like the Dragon's Triangle out there by Japan, the Bridgewater Triangle in the Massachusetts area. There's even a Lake Michigan Triangle, Nevada, but you're right there by the Bermuda Triangle, which is the most famous. Let me go ahead and I'll toss up the map here real quick so people can get an idea of where that is.
Oh, super. I'm glad you got that.
Here we go. So we'll just start with the basics, Mark. What is the Bermuda Triangle?
The Bermuda Triangle is about a 720,000 square mile area, and it's essentially in a triangular pattern. The northern point is the island of Bermuda. The western point is Miami, Florida, and the southern point of the triangle is Puerto Rico. And it historically has been called the Devil's Triangle because of the disappearance and loss of lives. So many ships, and in the last 100 years, aircraft have disappeared. In fact, in the last century, there have been over 1,000 deaths attributed to unexplained disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. And it's been chronicled for the last 500 years. And I've got a lot of personal experience with it because, like I was saying, I live in East Coast Central Florida. So off the coast here is the western border of the Bermuda Triangle. But, I've spent a lot of my life visiting mystical and spiritual sites around the world and doing some pretty, I guess people call them adventurous things. But one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done is I spent a fair amount of time in the Caribbean serving on 2 different ships, tall sailing ships, the Polynesia and the Phantom. And I actually have a picture of the Phantom right here I'd like to share with everybody and see if there's, can you see that okay without the glare?
Yeah, there's no glare. We can see it.
Okay, great. The Phantom has a fascinating history to it. It was the last in the line of the tall sailing ships. And they were sort of the successor to the clipper ships of the 19th century. And this one was built by the Duke of Westminster in the 1920s. And eventually Aristotle Onassis acquired it. And he was going to give it as a wedding present to the movie star Grace Kelly when she was going to be married to Prince Rainier of Monaco. But then Onassis didn't end up on the invitation list, so he reneged on the present and kept the Windjammer. Long story short, the Windjammer fleet acquired the Phantom, and she was about 320 feet long. and became the flagship of the Windjammer fleet. So we would cruise along the southern border of the Bermuda Triangle, and there was this one island that wasn't far from Antigua, and it's an uninhabited island. And we'd always stop there, and we'd offload the passengers, and they do a big barbecue, sort of the Caribbean version of a luau, and it was really great. But right off the coast of this island was the Bermuda Triangle. And the crew was largely West Indian. And the West Indians they're very spiritual. I mean, there's a big belief in magic and voodoo there. And, Mike and Victoria, without sounding cliche, I'll tell you what, every time we'd look out into the Bermuda Triangle, it always seemed like the sky was purple and stormy, and we'd see lightning. And the West Indians would be like, "Hey, Mon, we are not going there, Mon." And they never wanted to sail into it. And I was with them totally. But of course, cruise ships, military vessels, airplanes fly through and go through the Bermuda Triangle all the time. So there's this myth that, oh my God, if you fly through the Bermuda Triangle, someone is going to come and grab you, but which is not the case. However, there are several mysterious disappearances, which we're going to talk about. But with the Phantom, it breaks my heart what happened to the Phantom, because in 1998, Hurricane Mitch was coming, and it's fascinating because we just had Hurricane Eta, and now we have Iota, which just devastated Nicaragua. And Hurricane Mitch essentially was following the same path as both Iota and Eta. And the Windjammer offloaded all the passengers in Belize, and then the Phantom was going up the coast of off the Yucatan, because they figured, all right, we're going to go north of it, and they're heading for the Bay Islands. But then Hurricane Mitch switched direction, and the Phantom was never heard from again. And she went down with all hands. 31 lives were lost. The only thing that ever appeared was a ladder. They found one of the ladders floating, and I always, I remember when I heard about that, because once you were on a Windjammer, they called you an old salt. It broke my heart. It was an elegant ship, and I knew some of the crew, and so for me that was a great tragedy. While it technically did not occur in the Bermuda Triangle, it was still a very, very
well, something close and personal to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and just, you hear about, the loss of 31 lives. I mean, that's just, extremely sad.
It really is. And on a ship like that, when you get hit by a powerful hurricane, there's really very little hope when you get waves of the magnitude, and especially the type of storms like Iota and Eta. I understand Iota was a Category 5 hurricane. Now, living in East Coast Florida, I've been through, I think, 16 hurricanes and 2 tornadoes. And it's funny because I got some neighbors, they just moved down from New York, and they're like, "Ooh, a hurricane, that sounds exciting."
Oh.
It's like, yeah, let me tell you, get over that real quick.
Yeah, I've been through a handful, and that's enough for me.
Yeah, that's 15 hurricanes and 2 tornadoes, more than I ever would like to. I could go another 15 lifetimes without that again.
Yeah.
At least with a hurricane, it's coming. It's the tornadoes. You don't see them coming until it's too late.
No, you don't. And one of the things that people don't realize about hurricanes is that they cause tornadoes. So a lot of the damage is because on the edge of the hurricane, on the periphery of the hurricane, the outer bands, and then during the eye of the hurricane, it creates conditions conducive to tornadic activity. Mm-hmm. And a couple of years ago on the street that I live on, a tornado touched down. It ripped the pool cage off one of the neighbor's house and threw it through the front window of the neighbor's house across the street. And it happened, within seconds, literally. Yeah. And speaking of things happening within seconds, I want to talk a bit about the history of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, absolutely.
500 years ago, in 1492, Christopher Columbus, as we all know, was sailing He was sailing west in his hopes to get to the East Indies. And he encountered some very strange things as he approached what is now North and Central America. And he didn't know, he thought he was in the East Indies, what would now be Indonesia. And he wrote in his journal about this mysterious sea filled with seaweed. And his crew was terrified of it because they felt that their ship was going to get, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria were going to get caught in the seaweed. Well, we now know this to be what's called the Sargasso Sea. And the Sargasso Sea is about 200 square miles, excuse me, a gigantic clump of seaweed off of North America, and it's a few hundred miles off North America and off the Bahamas. And ancient mariners felt that it was filled with sea monsters and that ships would get caught there and they would die. And ships do get caught there, but not because of the seaweed, but because of the doldrums. And the doldrums is an area in the ocean where all of a sudden there's no wind. You always hear about the trade winds, and that's what the ships like the Windjammer and certainly Columbus's ships, they wanted to catch the prevailing winds and then, they'd be able to sail through it. So first off, the Sargasso Sea was looked at as an evil omen by Christopher Columbus's crew. Today, marine biologists refer to the Sargasso Sea as the ocean's rainforest because of the abundant sea life, and it creates breeding conditions for many different species. But 5 centuries ago, it was looked as a wicked and negative thing. And then Columbus reported a strange fire from the sky which plunged into the ocean. In reviewing his captain's log, it is most likely a meteor that he saw. Right. But then a few weeks later, in the same region, Columbus reported strange lights hovering over the ocean. Okay, so this is where, the legends and the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle really start to kick up. And then the crowning bit of mystery was Columbus reported that on all 3 of his ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina, all the compasses started malfunctioning and going haywire. So what do we have there? Well, I'm going to discount the Sargasso Sea. Okay, that's just a marine, right? A beautiful actually marine ecosystem. But we have magnetic anomalies. We have something going, which cause a malfunction of compasses and therefore difficulty in navigation. And then we have strange lights hovering over the ocean. So it's very interesting that this was the first in the long line of unexplainable phenomenon that occurred in what we now call the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that goes all the way back to Columbus. And yeah, the fireball was probably just a meteor, but a lot of like the ancient alien theorists will speculate that the lights in the sky may have been UFOs and things like that. Certainly the magnetic anomalies with the compasses is interesting. We do have a question down in the chat from Sarah Youssef asking if people believe that there's a significant EMF anomaly that messed with the technology of the time of the ships and planes went missing. And I know we're going to get into a lot of those different stories, but what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're definitely getting into that. I want to fast forward about 400 plus years to 1918. In the waning days of World War I, the U.S. Navy's largest cargo vessel, the USS Cyclops, it was 520 tons, 1 million pounds. And it was considered one of the most technologically advanced ships of the day. Why? Because it had a radio. Okay. but back then they called it the wireless, and the Cyclops, all of a sudden, it just disappeared. There was no radio signal, no SOS. And the U.S. Navy went out searching for it, and they couldn't find a trace of it, not an oil slick, no debris, and nothing. And President Woodrow Wilson said only God and the sea knew what happened to that great ship. Now, strangely, In 1941, 2 other Cyclops-class ships also disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, and neither of them sent out a distress signal. And by 1941, ships were quite a bit more sophisticated, and they had more than just radio. They had all sorts of equipment to detect anomalies and more sophisticated weather equipment. So whatever happened to these 3 very large ships happened extremely fast, and it didn't even give the crew a chance to send out a distress signal.
Okay, I have questions now.
Okay, go ahead, Victoria.
Before you get too far. Okay. With the metal compasses spinning around, that would be because of a more magnetic nature of that area. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you go with that thought, and there was like this huge burst of magnetic energy or whatever coming from the water, could that not also be like the northern lights, but just in the Bermuda Triangle? Could that explain the colors of the skies? And are the horse latitudes the same things as the doldrums? Do they go through the Bermuda Triangle?
That one I don't know, but
Okay.
with the EM fields, I was going to wait till later, but we're talking about it now.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
The rabbit hole,
Well, the first theory, not the first, but the latest theory as to why ships disappear so rapidly in the Bermuda Triangle is a phenomenon known as rogue waves. And rogue waves have been reported by mariners since ancient times, and a lot of oceanographers and marine biologists thought that, well, this is just a sea tail. But now they've been identified, they've been observed, and there's a lot that goes into it. So we all know that the ocean has currents. So you have ocean swells, okay? And, I've been out on the ocean, and there's ocean swells. Even though I generally don't get seasick, I've been in some ocean swells. And what happens with rogue waves, you have ocean swells, but then a number of ocean swells which start working in tandem. So you have several of these swells which start building up and empowering each other. So you have this rapid frequency of the waves. And then in the opposite direction, a sudden storm will cause a storm wave. So you have these ocean swells that hit the storm wave, and the frequency drops, and instead it surges in amplitude. So what happens is you have these 2 great forces in the ocean, they collide, and then they form a tower of water, a rogue wave, which can be taller than a 10-story building, over 100 feet tall. And these rogue waves occur and then disappear within seconds. So if you have a ship, even the size of the Cyclops, 520 feet long, 1 million pounds, and all of a sudden a 100-foot wave hits it right out of the blue, well, of course, the crew wouldn't have time to respond. They wouldn't have time to engage in evasive maneuvers, much less send an SOS. And so this is what the latest theory is about why so many ships have disappeared. But Victoria, you correctly pointed out, what about compasses? Rogue waves would not necessarily affect compasses, nor would rogue waves account for the aircraft that have disappeared. And perhaps the most famous account occurred in 1945. It was Flight 19, which was 5 Avenger fighter bombers, okay? And we were still in World War II, but we're in the final days of World War II, and there was a training mission. And back then, Fort Lauderdale, these 5 fighter bombers, state-of-the-art aircraft, for the day, flew out of Fort Lauderdale to do a training mission over the Bahamas. And they reported all of a sudden stormy conditions, lightning, wind, rain, and all the compasses going haywire. So they're radioing to Fort Lauderdale, and they were under the command of Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor. He was an experienced airman, and he'd a combat-hardened veteran from the South Pacific. So he was not some neophyte rookie in charge of a squadron. So he was radioing to Fort Lauderdale, and he said, we are over the Florida Keys. which didn't make sense because they were supposed to be over the Bahamas. Well, they weren't over the Florida Keys. It's that their compasses were completely thrown off kilter. Meanwhile, at the same time, there was a call from another pilot over the Florida Keys who said that his compass was malfunctioning. So now we have in an area several hundred miles long between the Florida Keys and the Bahamas, we've got at least 6 different aircraft, including basically the Top Gun pilots of the day in flight 19, all reporting that their compasses are malfunctioning. Fort Lauderdale, the Naval Air Command issued an order that they switch on their emergency locator, their ZBX receivers, which are supposed to lock on to land-based towers. But apparently there was so much electromagnetic RFI radio frequency interference that flight 19 didn't get that, and they just completely disappeared.
That's what I was going to say. If there was so much electromagnetic interference, and they were wireless radios, as you call them, it's just like when we have solar flares, it disrupts our TV signals. It would do the same thing with the audio, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. And then when the Avengers went missing, Fort Lauderdale scrambled 2 rescue planes, and both of them disappeared.
And they went missing.
Too.
Yeah,
they went missing too.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's something fascinating to me about this story is that not only did Flight 19 go missing, but also the rescue planes. So you had several planes here missing. To me, if it's a solar flare or something like that, the rescue planes would not be affected by that.
Exactly.
Because it would have already passed.
Yeah, and when the Navy conducted an investigation, the report actually said it was as if they flew off to Mars. They found no trace. Now, with one of the rescue planes, there was a ship out at sea that saw an explosion, and they did find some debris, and they did find an oil slick. So one of the planes exploded, but we still don't know why. And now I want to answer Victoria's question directly.
I have more questions now.
Oh, good. Geologists have long theorized and believed that the Earth's core is molten iron, and magnets are iron, and that magnetite, which is obviously a magnetic metal, and it's liquid, and that there may be some spots on the Earth where the magnetic activity is much more apparent and disruptive. So it isn't so much the ocean that is causing this, it's what's underneath the ocean floor.
Right.
So beneath the bottom of the ocean, it is believed that the magnetic activity of this area, it surges. And then when it surges, it causes all the compasses to completely go erratic. They go haywire. And people confuse true north with magnetic north. The magnetic North Pole and the true North Pole are 2 different things. The University of Oregon has been studying magnetic north, which is actually a couple hundred miles south of, what we consider the top of the Earth, the North
Right.
Pole. And it moves. It's moved 620 miles to the east in the last century. So for some reason, there's spots in the Earth, and like Mike, what you were saying with the Alaska Triangle and the Dragon Triangle, these other areas, these very well could be areas where the Earth's crust is thinner, so that this surge of liquid magnetite is bubbling up to the crust, and then all of a sudden causing this huge EM disruption, which in turn would completely affect radio. It would affect compasses. It would affect all types of navigational equipment, anything that operated on magnetism or electromagnetic energy.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what we talked about on the Alaska Triangle, was that the magnetic core of the Earth, that it was welling up like that, creating. And we used it as an example, talking about vortices and portals, so that you had the vortex energy welling up from the Earth's magnetic core, and then creating things like portals. And that's another theory that's out there is are some of these disappearances actually disappearing through a portal into another dimension. I know one of those stories down there in the Bermuda Triangle is with Bruce Gernon, where he actually flew through what he called electronic fog, and fortunately came out in this dimension, and we're able to interact and see him again. But he had some sort of time slip there where he lost several minutes of time.
Well, he did and he didn't. I've gone over Bruce Gernon's story quite a bit, and in 1970 he was a pilot who routinely flew between Miami and Andros Island in the Bahamas. And like you said, Mike, he was coming back one time, and all of a sudden he lost time because the trip suddenly took a third less time. There was this horrible lightning storm, and what he called was an electronic fog. And the next thing he knows, he's over Miami, and that should have taken at least an hour. Instead, it was a couple minutes. Well, scientists have theorized that what may have happened is he got caught up in what's known as a roll cloud. And roll clouds are extremely rare phenomenon. And what happens is that the air pressure causes warm air to rise, and then it hits below the dew point, and it forms, it looks like it's rolling across the horizon. And roll clouds never touch the ground. And that what happened to him is all of a sudden he got hit from behind by a roll cloud, and it propelled him at extreme speed. Now, we all want to say that maybe he went into some time vortex, but here's why I doubt that he did. The clocks on Bruce Gernon's plane matched those at the runway where he landed in Miami. So there was no disparity in time. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that Bruce Gernon didn't hit some type of vortex, but the counter to the argument, and that's what I like about working with you, Victoria, and working with you, Mike, is that we look at both sides of the issue. So he very well could have flown into an anomaly, at least from a meteorological standpoint, almost as fascinating as a vortex, which is a roll cloud. But Mike, to get back to what you're talking about at the Alaska Triangle, that too is another theory with all of this. Is because, as Victoria, you pointed out, so underneath the Earth's crust, we have magnetite. We have this liquid magnetic material, and it's churning around, and it is causing a magnetic tornado. It's a whirlpool magnetic. And Mike, we were talking about this, you and I were talking about this the other day about interdimensional travel. Right, and there's the Alcubierre warp drive, and Miguel Alcubierre was a Mexican physicist who in 1994 theorized that a craft in space, instead of going beyond the speed of light, which according to relativistic physics of Albert Einstein is not possible, but by generating an intense electromagnetic field around the vessel, a so-called warp bubble. Okay, now we're getting all Star Trek-y in here, but a little bit. But Star Trek, Star Trek is based largely on science and theoretical physics. But the Alcubierre warp drive theorizes that we can bend the fabric in space-time. In other words, you stretch the fabric of space-time behind the vehicle and shrink it in front of the vehicle. Ergo, you can do a dimensional shift from one location to another within seconds.
So you're bending time, basically.
You're bending time and space. So theoretically, it is possible that what is happening here on a geological basis is in effect creating this electromagnetic warp bubble, if you will, which could be causing these aircraft and these ships to vanish within seconds. I mean, look, I talk to dead people, and there's a lot of people who say, well, that's not possible. Okay. Well, it is. All right. And we're working on, and I write books about, and I've been studied about the science behind this. So just because something may be outside of our realm of experience or our understanding, or that we have not yet invented the technology to prove this or to enact this does not mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Victoria, I know you had some additional questions, so go right
geez,
ahead.
that was so 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, but still pertinent.
What were we talking about? I forgot.
All right.
I worked on the other things, but I forgot.
Not a problem. We'll go ahead and get some questions here from the chat room. I know we have some other things to discuss.
Yeah, sure.
Mark. But, well, first of all, there are a number of comments down in there. I like this one from Auntie Coco. This is, I saw your video on guiding echoes, Mark. Loved it. Thank you for being so real and keeping it real. So
thank you. I appreciate it. That's
your
very
way.
kind.
Donna Lisko was wondering, do we know how many of these triangles could actually exist on Earth?
Wow. Okay. Well, Mike, you got one in Alaska. I got one down the street. We got the Dragon Triangle. You said there's one in
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater?
Well, Bridgewater's Massachusetts. Lake Michigan is another. There's Nevada. So what is that? 5 or 6 right there?
It's 5 or 6.
Do they go along the telluric lines?
Well, and that's a theory there that with the Earth's energy grid, the telluric currents, and all that they could be placed along that. But I don't. We'd have to map it out, I suppose.
Well, it's funny because when we think of the Earth is geologically active, and it's almost startling when you think that the Earth's core is molten. Okay, so. The Earth is what, 5 billion years old? It's estimated between like
4.5 billion. It's an estimate. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, we don't know for sure. But that's a heck of a long time for it not to cool down and become one solid chunk of rock. And it's actually fascinating to think that there's this glob of molten iron that formed a crust, and these little parasite creatures, meaning us, have formed on the outside of it, and yet it's encapsulated in a life-sustaining bubble of air. Wow. Okay, so when people say, well, that's not possible, think about that for a second. And so the Earth being geologically active, there are volcanoes in the Caribbean. I was on the island of Montserrat back when I was on the Polynesia. And Montserrat, I remember walking around in the volcano there, and I was expecting to be like this big cone, like you see in the movies. And instead it was like, bloop, bloop, bloop. It was like this sulfur pit. And we're walking around, and they said, well, this is an active volcano. I was like, well, no kidding. It's hot, and it smells of sulfur and all this. Well, a year later, the island of Montserrat exploded.
Oh, no.
And the volcano erupted and essentially destroyed most of the island, which is, once again, another tragedy. Beautiful island and amazing people that live there. And Alaska certainly is geologically active. I mean, Earth is geologically active. So, and who's to say that another one of these anomalous magnetic fields won't occur somewhere else? A couple years ago, I was in Hawaii, and we were filming a pilot, and I was in the helicopter that Smithsonian and Nat Geo uses. And it was really cool because it's like this real aerodynamic. And we were flying over Kilauea, or not directly over, but close to it, when Kilauea was in full eruption mode. And seeing that was just one of the most breathtaking and overwhelming things I've ever experienced. And the Hawaiians on board were like, Mark, do you feel anything? And I'm looking at this from a scientific standpoint that, well, this is geologic activity, but I got this really strange sensation of pain and childbirth. And the Hawaiians take their belief in the goddess Pele very, very seriously. And let me tell you something. To me, it was more than just watching an incredible volcanic eruption. There was something. I'm not going to go so far and say that, I communicated with the goddess Pele, but there was something there that was more than just geologic phenomenon. Now, maybe I was picking up on intensive electromagnetic activity, or maybe I was patching into some type of interdimensional communication. Who's to say? But as Victoria, Mike, and I know, there is a lot more to reality than what meets the human eye.
Okay, can I ask you a dumb question? Kind of
There are
dumb,
no
but not
dumb
really
questions.
There are no dumb questions.
Oh, hello. Hi, have we met? No. Okay. Is it possible to communicate? Okay, you're a psychic. Can you communicate with the earth? Was that perhaps a volcano giving birth to something new? Maybe we're picking up on that.
Well, certainly, it was giving birth in that the big island of Hawaii is now, I think, 2 square miles larger because of that eruption. I've communicated with a fair amount of non-human spiritual intelligence, animals for one, also the elementals. And the elementals, in Japan they call them the kami, in England they call them fairies, in Ireland leprechauns, in Hawaii was it the metahune. So it depends where in the world you go. So there certainly are many different forms of spiritual intelligence. It is only human arrogance which assumes that we populate the spirit world. So to answer your question directly, Victoria, I'm going to keep an open mind on that one. That's a definite maybe.
Sounds good, though. I mean, why not? I mean, it's a living thing. It has feelings, I guess. We heard it.
I've been extremely honored in my life to have met Neil Armstrong. I met Buzz Aldrin. I met John Glenn. I met Captain Ed Foreman. And talking to astronauts and asking what was it like. And I had the most time with John Glenn. And he said, when you look down and see Earth and how alive it is, he said it's breathtaking. He goes, there's no more beautiful sight. He said, and then he started thinking humans are crazy because this is the only place we have to live and they seem hell-bent on blowing it up.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a real shame too, but yeah, we're crazy like that, I suppose.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I guess we take it for granted, for the most part. I mean, that's a unique perspective that the astronauts have from being outside the planet and looking in. And, most people are kind of just inundated with their daily lives and tasks and all that and kind of forget about the bigger picture.
Yeah, what I'm sorry, go ahead, Victoria.
That's fine. Sorry. I was just going to say, if you follow astrology, I was looking at the videos and stuff in the charts yesterday, and we're actually moving into a 200-year time period where the air signs are going to rule. So it's supposed to be more healing, more thinking, more doing, less killing, less destructive. So maybe that's what we need.
Well, that would certainly be an improvement over, human history. And, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Buzz Aldrin who said what they didn't expect when they were standing on the moon is the Earth rise. I mean, they knew that, they're going to see her. Yeah. They said, like we always talk about, here we go up to the beach and watch the full moon rise over the ocean. It's like, he said when the Earth rose on the horizon of the moon, and they're like, I mean, how big and blue and beautiful. They said it just was astounding. And I remember, Neil Armstrong, he had a reputation for real stiff and he was a fascinating guy, but he was an astronaut to the fingertips. And I remember this little kid goes, what was it like walking on the moon? And all of a sudden he goes, it was great. He said it was so much. It was amazing to see him light up like that. And, he said, because because it's got 1/6 the amount of gravity that we do, so you can jump and bounce and all that type of thing. And certainly NASA was like, please don't jump and bounce too much because we don't need you puncturing your spacesuit. Right. But
that would be bad.
just a little, yeah.
Get a little duct tape.
Electromagnetic fields, supposedly, according to what I've read in astronautics periodicals, Mars does not have magnetic fields.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that? Because Mars is supposedly, the most like Earth in our solar system. but apparently it doesn't have a north or a south pole or a magnetic sphere. And I'm assuming NASA has run enough tests to prove that. But is that also one of the things that makes Earth unique? Is our magnetic poles?
If it doesn't have a magnetic pole, does it flip around as it rotates the sun, or does it stay in some sort of geosynchronous orbit that doesn't make it flip?
What the
Mars?
Well, Mars rotates. Okay, it rotates. A Martian day and a Martian year. Of course, I think it's like a year and a half, or was it 2 years? Because it's farther away from the sun.
Right.
It takes
But
it longer.
It doesn't flip like this.
It does rotate. It rotates. They have a night and a day.
It spins.
Yeah, it spins. All
it doesn't
the
go
planets
upside
do.
down.
Yeah, all the planets
Okay.
do, and all the planets are essentially, if you look at the sun, they're all like in the same band. They're all essentially on the same latitude, if you will, and they all rotate counterclockwise around the sun. But
it doesn't go like north south, flippy like that.
I believe that it does. I see what you're saying. In other words, because we have a winter, I believe that it does.
Okay.
And I remember that years ago, there was a thought that there were canals on Mars, and there were patches, and so people thought, they got, upon a closer examination, there wasn't. But I still think that it is in humanity's best interest to explore Mars.
Oh, yeah.
And because that's what we do. Okay. Now, Columbus was a horrible person. All right. He was in search of fortune and glory. And when Columbus's crew encountered the indigenous population of the Bahamas, and the people in the Bahamas were a lot different than the people in Central America. Okay, like you get the Aztecs and the Mayans, they were practicing human sacrifice and cannibalism, and they had empires and they were waging wars. But the Arawak Indians of the Bahamas were essentially very, very peaceful. And Columbus wrote in his journal, they'll make excellent slaves. And that always to me just hits me here, because I always wanted to think of Christopher Columbus as a great man. He was an explorer, but when you look at the way the Europeans came to the New World and just subjugated it and infected the indigenous population with diseases, within 10 years of the Spaniards landing in Central America, 90% of the population died from European diseases. We're talking smallpox, the flu, the common cold. And so when people say, oh, this pandemic is a hoax, do you think the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the people of Central America felt that this plague that came out of nowhere was a hoax? And so that's why we have to take these things very seriously, and we have to start respecting each other and certainly Mother Earth. Sorry, I don't mean to get semi-political here, but it's not really political. It's a matter of survival. It's a matter of survival.
It is, and I've read accounts of, like along the Amazon, you read some of these ancient reports from actually the Spaniards themselves, where they had discovered these great large cities, and then when other explorers came after them, they were all gone, and the only explanation they had was, must have been the smallpox or whatever. But for many years, people didn't believe that these civilizations actually existed. But now, with the decimation of the rainforest, which is another tragedy, they're actually stumbling across the ruins of these cities that had been reported long ago. So yes, they were actually decimated by the smallpox. And
it's
tragic.
I've spent time both in Central America and in Peru, and both in the Andes and the Peruvian Amazon. And the Incan Empire. Okay, the Aztecs they were one thing, and the Mayans were another. But the Peruvian, the Incas, it was essentially a third of a good quarter to a third of South America was under their control. It was roughly the size of the Roman Empire. Okay, that's how big the Inca Empire was. And when the Spaniards invaded, they had 150 soldiers. The Incan army was 100,000 men, but they were so sick most of them could barely stand. And then when the Spanish unleashed cannon fire, it caused pandemonium. I mean, the idea that 150 men could defeat 100,000 is really shocking. But by the time the Spaniards ever got to the Incan capital of Cusco in the Andes, smallpox had essentially done the work for them. I mean, it's such a great tragedy when you look at this. And when we study history in school, they gloss over all this.
Yeah, they do.
You know.
Yeah.
And this is the history we need to be learning. People need to understand what happened. And I think that we must learn from the past. These pandemics, these plagues, these have decimated human populations for millennia.
Yep, they have. We got about 10 minutes left in the show. I do want to get to a couple of these other questions here. Back to the Bermuda Triangle.
Sure.
Sarah Youssef asks, has anyone done any satellite imaging of the area? Surely if the ships and planes were in the area, you could see them, depending on how deep the bottom of the ocean is.
Now, that is one of the great mysteries, and that's a good question, because they have been searching for these million-pound ships, the Cyclops, and they can't find them. That is, and so one of the theories is that the Gulf Stream is so strong it pulls the wreckage away. Now, I can almost buy that argument with the Avengers, okay, but not with a ship that weighs 1 million pounds. So that ties into, could it be a vortex? Could it be electromagnetic activity pulling them into, beneath the Earth's surface? What exactly is it? There's another theory, too, that the bottom of the ocean there produces tremendous amounts of methane, and that methane bubbles reduce the buoyancy of water, so a ship would immediately sink. It wouldn't be able to sustain itself, and that there's even the possibility that a large enough methane bubble could possibly bring down an aircraft. Now, I think, with the ship, I'll almost buy that. With an aircraft, I won't. Plus, methane is not going to make your compass go crazy.
But if it was a big methane bubble and it popped, wouldn't it go up and it could disrupt a plane?
Well, it could. It could. But but it wouldn't make the compasses go haywire.
Yeah, but if it happens so quickly, they're like, and then they crash and they go in the ocean. How do you recover from that? So that has nothing to do with the compass. I don't think it would.
Yeah, but there were reports of the compasses having issues. Is the thing?
Well, okay.
Oh yeah, they were already radioing, and that's why Flight 19 all of a sudden they thought they were over the Gulf of Mexico, west of the Florida Keys, when in actuality their last known position was still over the Bahamas. So then that's because all their instrumentation was completely disrupted, and they were clueless. Now, standard operating procedure for the U.S. Navy was, if something goes wrong off of the coast of North America, fly due west, because then you'll go over. And in fact, one of Lieutenant Taylor's, one of the pilots said, if we just damn fly west, we'll be okay, we'll get home. And apparently, for whatever reason, Lieutenant Taylor ignored the plea from this other pilot.
Ooh,
wow,
not good.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Now, here's another quickie mystery.
Sure.
In 1991, a bunch of treasure hunters found some Avenger fighter bombers in the ocean right off of Fort Lauderdale. But the serial numbers on them did not match Flight 19. So they found the same type of aircraft, but not the ones from that ill-fated flight.
Did they ever discover where these were from?
As much as I've checked on that, no. And then that gets into this, is it an alternate universe thing,
right, right.
So I guess that's a mystery to be explored another time. But yeah, no, they never found where those were. But, back in World War II, they were doing all sorts of tests. And back then, Florida wasn't really the vacation destination that it turned into. So they could have been doing mock battles and things, and they could have crashed some planes on some test flights, and they really wouldn't have made that big of a deal about it. especially if, the pilots parachuted out and they rescued them, because we're talking almost, 50 years after it happened. And so who would have recorded that?
Right.
But if they were doing something like the Philadelphia experiment.
Who's to say?
If you watch Close
that
Encounters,
real?
if you watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind, then the planes ended up out in the desert. So
I knew I saw them somewhere. There is actually a huge plane graveyard between Phoenix and Tucson.
Oh.
It's just the weirdest thing. You're driving out there and there's planes.
Yeah, I drove by that. So that's what that is. Because I was going from Tucson to Phoenix, and we were driving by there, and it's like, that's a lot of airplanes.
It's a plane graveyard. You can just go there for, hey, if I need a carburetor or whatever planes use.
So they harvest parts off of it, I guess. Yeah.
It's aliens. That's it.
That's it. It's always aliens. Let me ask you this, Mark, since it's also right in that area. What do you think of the Bimini Road?
The Bimini Road, okay, that's many people believe that could be part of Atlantis, because it appears to be all of a road. It's like a mile or so long, and they're square blocks that fit together, and it's off the island of Bimini. But there are oceanographers who say that the Bimini Road, hold on, let me pull up my cheat sheet here on the Bimini Road.
That's funny, because Lee and I were just talking about that the other day.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I was asking. I got the questions,
Yeah. Okay, the archaeologists call this pseudo-archaeology, and the narrative that the Bimini Road is some type of secret pathway to Atlantis. What they're saying is that it's actually a natural formation, and they found this type of anomaly in other places in the ocean. And they look like roadblocks. And if it was Atlantis, according to Greek legend and Greek myths, Atlantis would be 7,000 years old. But these blocks are organic, and they carbon-14 dated them, and they're only 2,000 to 4,000 years old. So they wouldn't fit into Plato's analysis or legend. And also another geologist, Eugene Shin, he was able to do some drilling at the core. They call it beach rock. And he was able to conclude that they're all over the place. And also that, once again, they were not man-made. So, but there's always the skeptics, because other people are saying that these could be a road to what would have been Atlantis. And hold on. Atlantis was first mentioned in Plato's Timaeus, and he describes a war between Atlantis and Athens. And then according to Plato, the Athenians defeated the Atlantans. And then in 1968, there were some divers off of Bimini in the Bahamas. They discovered this line of stones in 18 feet of water, which looked like a road. And the blocks are rectangular, and it looks like they've been cut on right angles. But beach rock, in fact, my dining room table is made out of beach rock, and then I got it some years ago. It's really beautiful. They also call it coral stone or fossil stone, and you're not supposed to mine it anymore. So I got mine before the ban on it. Of course, I have to say that on.
Oh, so you have contraband there, okay?
But I say honestly, the jury's still out on that. I don't think there's been enough study done on it. And okay, so these things are 2,000 to 4,000 years old. That's still a long time. Let's say they're 4,000 years old. I've never been in the Atlantis school of thought. And I know that for psychic mediums, that's very unusual. I know Edgar Cayce was big on Atlantis. But one of my passions is archaeology. And I think that before we jump to conclusions about something, we have to subject it to the scientific method, examine it empirically. And to date, there's been very little evidence that Atlantis ever existed. And if it did, that it wouldn't necessarily be in the Bahamas. The most likely location for Atlantis is assumed to be the island of Santorini in the Mediterranean, which was destroyed in classical times, actually before classical times, let's say about 2,500 plus years ago, by a great volcano. And certainly the Aegean Sea between Turkey and Greece is very geologically active. They just had a big earthquake there, I think about a week or so ago. It's like 6 on the Richter scale. So I would tend to think that if there was an Atlantis, it would actually be more likely to have been in the Mediterranean than it would be in the Bahamas.
Yep.
Well, Mike, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I mean, my thoughts. I mean, I never believed that the Bimini Road was Atlantis. I'd like to know what they're carbon dating with, because you're not supposed to be able to carbon date rocks, so there would have to be something maybe that's embedded with it that they're carbon dating. I'm not sure, but what I always looked at it was because of the structure of it. It's like, okay, that looks vaguely man-made, so perhaps it was some sort of ancient wall or whatever. Now the ocean levels are higher now than they were a long time ago. You know, ever since the ice age ended, the waters have been, filling back up. So, we have so much archaeology, so many ancient cities now that are underwater. This could have been one, not Atlantis. I've seen a lot of different arguments for where Atlantis could be throughout the Mediterranean and even out into the Atlantic Ocean a little bit, but not that far west.
Yeah. That's the problem I have with it too. Yeah. The reason they could you're absolutely correct. You can't carbon 14 date inorganic matter. So that way, if they find a sword, they can't. Oh, let's carbon 14 date it. But the beach rock, it's made of. It's organic. Okay, it's coral basically.
Okay,
and so there's strata. Okay, my notes say that Eugene Shin was able to do drilling to get to the core of the beach rock, okay? And he was able to conclude that the older beach rock cores were identical to the newer ones on the main swimming beach near Bimini. They also noted that the blocks were embedded with trash left by tourists. Oh, well, that's always nice. Okay. While the beach rock on the Bimini Road had no material embedded, showing no proof of any ancient civilization. Which is fascinating too. Then he X-radiographed the Bimini Road blocks to reveal internal stratification, so that would indicate organic, that was consistent with beach rock in the area, as well as the fact that the internal stratification is a natural process that would be almost impossible to replicate in man-made production. So the carbon-14 dating on the Bimini Road blocks showed that the stone was actually 2,000 to 4,000 years old. According to Plato, Atlantis would be around 7,000 years old, making the Bimini Road or wall much too young to be leading to Atlantis. So there you go.
All right.
All right. I have one question. It's bugged me since I was a kid, since In Search Of was on.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, I watched
In Search
that.
Of. Nice.
I love that show. Anyway, if Atlantis is not over there by Florida out that way, why is it called the Atlantic Ocean then?
Yes, I always wondered about that too. But the Straits of Gibraltar were, according to Greek mythology, the sky was held up by the Titan Atlas. Okay.
Right.
And what happened was Hercules showed up. And that's why they call the Rock of Gibraltar the Pillars of Hercules. And Hercules took the burden from Atlas, and Atlas was ready to take off on him and stick Hercules with it. And Hercules said, but wait, can you hold this for a minute so I can get my cloak to put it on my shoulders to cushion the burden? And Atlas, okay. So he picks up the sky, and Hercules says, see ya. So that's why the Rock of Gibraltar was referred to as the Pillar of Hercules, and the Atlantic Ocean was named after the Titan Atlas. But that's because I always thought the same thing. Ooh, Atlantic, where did the name come from? And I was like, okay, we're going to get an etymological link here, and shucks, we didn't.
Darn.
That was good though. Sharpest tack in the box, Victoria.
Sometime I'm the only tack in the box.
All right. Well, we are at the end of our show. Mark, this has been fascinating. We always love having you on. Where can people find you and your work? And I'll go ahead and I'll put up your books here again.
Sure. My website is evidenceofeternity.com. That's the same as my book, Evidence of Eternity. Please visit my site, sign up for my newsletter. You can follow me on social media. You can order my books. And if you would like to do a one-on-one session with me where I do a reading of extending, if you mention Mike or Victoria, or even more importantly, Edge of the Rabbit Hole, in the application form, you'll qualify for a reduced fee reading for a session. And I want to make that available to fans and listeners of Edge of the Rabbit Hole. And Mike and Victoria, thank you so much for having me on, and I look forward to returning.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, we love having you on, Mark. Always very insightful. And yeah, everybody, mention us, get a discount from Mark with one of his readings, and definitely check out his books. So again, Mark,
looking forward to when you come back down to Houston. So
absolutely. And I was talking to Mike. We got plenty of other intriguing and mysterious topics to talk about. So,
we do.
Yeah.
Always a lot of fascinating
we got
topics.
Interesting jobs,
We do.
It's like I thank God every day that I'm able to work with the metaphysical world, and certainly to work with people like you, Mike and Victoria, because, not to paraphrase the X-Files, but to paraphrase the X-Files, the truth is out there.
It is.
Exactly.
And we are discovering it. So
that's right.
And then we come on Edge of the Rabbit Hole and discuss it. So there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, Mark. Take care, my
Thank
friend.
you. All right.
Have a great
Many
night.
Blessings. All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, everybody. Mark Anthony, always a great guy to talk to. So.
Oh, he's fun.
Oh, he is. And he's so intelligent. I mean, he's a psychic, so he does readings, and he's he's done the gallery thing, and he's goes on tour and all that stuff. He's been on a bunch of talk shows and all that. He
was answering my questions as I was writing them down. I'm like, okay, scratch that
Yeah,
one.
well, he's so intelligent. He is, he's absolutely fascinated by a lot of these different subjects, and so he's done a ton of research, and he is or actually he had been a trial lawyer, so very, very intelligent guy. Yeah. So which is why he's called the psychic lawyer. So
Ooh,
yeah.
I knew you were going to say that.
There we go.
Intuitive,
Yeah. All right. So yeah, Quarantine Ghost is putting Mark's books down there in the chat. So thank you very much, Quarantine Ghost, for taking care of that. All right. Let's go ahead and get to the shout outs. So Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. We have Tom McNicholas, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, David Yeisley, and Joe Chandler. Thank you all for being Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons, and thank you to our other Patreon patrons as well, patreon.com/Haunted Road Media. All right, so the rest of the shout-outs. Oh, and by the way, stick around, because coming up next on Beyond the Shadows, we're going to be talking about American ancient sites of power. So there's going to be like all the fantastic earthworks and mounds and ancient structures that are actually around America. They aren't just overseas. We have them in America too, and so we'll be discussing those things right after this show. So,
excellent.
Yeah. So, all right, participants tab. Who do we have in here? We have Auntie Coco. Thanks for joining us tonight. There's Betty Lange. Grand old folks, appreciate it once again. Des Hernandez, thanks for joining us. Donna Liska, thank you once again. Lena the Fam, thank you as always. There's Eva Geller. Great to see you again. Haunted Road Media's Fairy Queen, Diane Hilbert. There she is. There's Greg Rankin and Helen Espinoza. Thank you all very much. Jennifer Bloomer, thanks for joining us once again. Kristen Louvier. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you for joining us tonight.
That's
Maz.
Ivy.
Oh, is it? Okay.
That's Ivy.
Cool. Maz Emery, thanks for joining us tonight. Mr. CO2, thank you as well. Sarah Morgan, thank you very much. And Sarah Youssef, thank you as well. There's Tammy Heitzman and TFT Tarot for today. Great to see you down there. There's the Haglin and Tracy Christian. Thank you as always. All right, we'll scroll through here and see who the participants tab may have missed. I know Adam Tillery is lurking down there, probably watching Curse of Oak Island, which I'll watch tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Forgot
about that.
It's a great show. Great show. It was the season premiere was a little awkward because of course, you know, they had the COVID restrictions and so like half the guys aren't even like out there on the island, so it's a little weird.
I'm catching up on American Horror Story, so I'm that far behind.
I think I'm 2 seasons behind on that.
I'm on season 3.
Oh, okay.
So I'm ways.
No, but I was right. There's Adam Tiller coming out of lurker mode. And Tim Schoen. Didn't the participants tab have Tim Schoen? I don't think it did.
Yeah. Tim said he'd be lurking today because he wasn't feeling well.
I saw him in the chat earlier. Yes, and Tim, I hope you're feeling better. I know he was at the doctor's earlier. So, all right, everybody. So that will do it for our shout-outs here on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Remember, we have the new Edge of the Rabbit Hole website as well, so you want to see the lineup for the rest of the year. It's out there. We have 3 more shows for this year, and that'll do it. So, also, no shows next week. So, off for Thanksgiving week, and then we'll come back for December 1st. So, you got that?
I'm gonna forget. I'm gonna be sitting here next week. Where's Mike?
Yep, I won't be here next week. Yeah, so November 24th, we are off, and then we come back December 1 and the 8th. And I can tell you, so Jessica Potter's December 1. She's a psychic medium, also known as the mermaid medium, because she will dress up, do some cosplay like a medium sometimes, or as a mermaid sometimes.
Talk to mermaids? No.
She does cosplay as a mermaid sometimes. Like she do the whole aerial thing. It's like, it's really good, actually. After that is our good friend Johnny Enoch, and then we're ending the year with Rob Guttrow after that. So
yay, we can talk weather.
Talk weather with Rob, yeah, and pet spirits, and we're also going to talk about holiday spirits with him as well. So lots of stuff to talk with Rob.
The ghost of Christmas pasta.
Yeah, there you go. Ghost of Christmas pasta.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Stay tuned for Beyond the Shadows. Coming up next, give me a few minutes to, switch everything out. I'll try to remember to turn on the blue lights, and we'll be talking about ancient sites of power. They do exist. So, all right, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.